¿El cerdo ibérico qué es?
What is the Iberian pig?
Pues es una
Well,
maravilla
it's a
que no sé quién
marvel,
inventó.
and no one knows who invented it.
Es una
It's
máquina.
a machine.
Es una máquina
A machine for
de hacer
making healthy
carnes
meat.
saludables. Es una máquina
It's
de
a machine for processing the Earth's products.
y que además
And what's more,
selecta los
those who
paladares
have the pleasure of consuming it are delighted by its incredible flavor. It's perfection.
Es el
It is the
responsable
reason
de
that 3 million hectares of Spanish soil have been kept just as they were when our ancestors lived here 2,000 years ago. This is not something new. It has been around for many, many years.
Despite being one of the most emblematic breeds used in Spanish cuisine, there have been many times when the Iberian pig has looked extinction square in the face. In the late 1980s, the porcine plague ravaged the entire southwestern Iberian Peninsula.
I know lots of people who lost everything. They went from 500,000 females to 5,000, and we're talking about 30 years. This is a quantity that the European Union currently considers to be half of the minimum that any species must number in order to be considered in danger of extinction. So back then, the European Union would undoubtedly have considered that the Iberian pig was extinct. The animals were not at rock bottom. No, it was much worse than that.
But the perseverance of the few farmers who were still fighting the seeming inevitability that this race would vanish from the Iberian oak pastures led to the creation of AECERIBER, an association with a clear objective, the conservation and protection of the Iberian pig.
And even though it looked like the Iberian pig was going to go extinct, it rose from the ashes like a kind of phoenix, and it came back stronger than ever.
The porcine plague may have been defeated, but today our Iberian pig is facing a new enemy. The proliferation of counterfeiters and disloyal competition have resulted in a fragile and unstable economic situation. Just like the plague did in its day, the battle for the term Iberian ham has once again placed the Iberian breed on the brink of extinction.
I think in general consumers are not very well informed. When you cross a male donkey with a horse or a female donkey with a horse, what you get is a mule. They don't call it a horse. I have a horse. No, actually, sir, what you have is a mule. Well, here, when you cross an Iberian pig with another animal that is not an Iberian pig, it's called an Iberian crossbreed, which is what it has always been traditionally called in the sector. But now the label reads Iberian ham. And the names are almost the same. One is called Pure Acorn-Fed Iberian Cured Ham, and the other is called Iberian Ham. And when someone buys a ham, they say, I bought an amazing Iberian ham. But hey, both last names are missing, Acorn-Fed and Pure. In the end, lots of times there's advertising for the company, and what a coincidence. You always see these fantastic pigs, pure Iberian pigs, grazing in oak pastures, eating acorns. Well, if that's not the truth, if that product isn't pure Iberian or free range, or anything like that, well, sir, that's called false advertising.
So that's why we have to fight, come hell or high water, against these mega producers. Outfits that are able to work any place in the world, that have nothing whatsoever to do with the traditional sector of Iberian ham, nothing to do with, say, the skill involved in raising a pig and producing a ham. What if I could talk with a powerful government figure? I'd take him on a walk through the countryside, and I'd show him how we raise purebred Iberian pigs. I wouldn't have to say anything else. He'd see everything in just one morning. Less than that, in an hour. A moment, one walk, one little talk, and a serving of ham at the end.
But what is an Iberian pig? If we look closely at their care and conservation, our first task would be to determine and clarify the specific characteristics of the breed. There is only one Iberian pig, but the breed can be divided into various bloodlines. AECERIBER was the driving force behind the creation of a genealogical text.
What is a genealogical text? A genealogical text is one that guarantees that the breeding attempts made between parents involve only purebred animals, ensuring that the bloodline remains pure. So we discovered that there were actually different kinds of Iberian pigs, just as we discovered that by crossing these breeds, we could improve the productivity of the breed considerably. There are 3 breeds that are in danger of extinction. The Negro Lampiño, whose name says it all. Lampiño means hairless. How can you identify this breed? Well, apart from the fact that it has absolutely no hair at all, if you had the opportunity to try this kind of ham from a Negro Lampiño, you'd probably say, wow, there's so much fat in this ham. They just sold me a bunch of fat for the price of meat. But then you'd have to taste it. And when you tried a slice of this ham, a thin slice at room temperature, never chilled, you'd smell it and you'd taste it. And you'd say, that's the most extraordinary salt pork. That's Lampiño. That's when you'd truly know what a Lampiño is. I'm sorry, but you have to buy the ham. The Torbiscal is the big macho male, the most powerful of all. It's the one that doesn't overshadow anyone from a production point of view. Certain Iberian bloodlines were crossed, and on occasion the hoof was streaked with white. And there's a saying in Spain, a pata negra expression, that can be applied to Iberian pigs. This is a pata negra. Well, this Torbiscal doesn't always have black hooves. It's ugly. The Torbiscal is the most productive Iberian pig. It's the one with the highest industrial value because it yields the highest quantity of meat. But it's a pity because it's also the ugliest, the most unpolished. It's the one that has bright red hair. It's the one that, because it's bigger, it doesn't have such a narrow hoof, because in order to carry its own weight, it has to have sufficient bone structure, and its bones have to have a sufficient heft. That's the Torbiscal. And it's the result of what can be achieved by breeding selectively within a pure bloodline, without admitting even one gene of foreign blood. And that can be done. It is done. And we just need this to be recognized. But I'm sure that the day will come when it will be recognized and they'll say, hats off. Finally, the Manchado de Jabugo, which is a very small stronghold in the province of Huelva. It comes from a cross of other bloodlines that existed in their day in that setting, and it's unique because it has spots. No other Iberian pig has spots. There are reasons that each of these breeds is in danger of extinction, but essentially, it's because there's practically no demand for any of them. In the Guadiana region, the Lampiño del Guadiana used to exist. There were like bathtub plugs, tiny, chubby, greasy. They were hardy like all Iberian pigs, but with very limited growth. And the father of José Luis Sánchez Pinilla had a thought. What if we were to cross a retinto with a lampiño? And he created the entrepelado. And he created what is probably the loveliest of the Iberian pigs, conserving an extraordinary fineness of limb with very little hair, an incredibly long snout, and a quality of meat that was a mix between the retinto and the excellence of the lampiño. That's the entrepelado. It's the genius of the father of José Luis Sánchez Pinilla. It's as simple as that.
Así de claro.
I remember my father spending hours and hours, and I did the same thing. Just watching. Watching, watching, watching. You can learn a huge amount doing that. The livestock fair in Zafra has always been a reference point. Herds of pigs would come from all over the southwest. They came on foot. When I was really little, I saw some 50,000 pigs there. Beautiful. When it rained, we were up to our knees in mud. And that fair was so great when it rained. When it didn't rain, it was like being in the desert. We were so covered in dust, we didn't recognize each other. Awful. You had to go to the fair in Zafra with a raincoat. If not, it was a bad fair because it hadn't rained, because the autumn weather hadn't come.
You have to remember that in the mid-1950s, from the center of the Iberian Peninsula all the way down to the south, that entire area belonged to the Iberian pig.
I remember in my hometown, where everyone had livestock, that when they saw the first white pigs, it was, oh, white pigs, and they went to see them, which is the case today with the Iberian pigs, you know. Now some people can't even recognize Iberian pigs.
The
retinto is the most numerous group. The retinto is the Iberian pig par excellence, the perfect variety for all kinds of terrain, farms, handling. With regards to levels of production, it's just a bit below the Torbiscal, but way above the other varieties, above the lampiño, and above the entrepelado. And it is reasonably productive. But in addition, it is able to hold on to an optimum level of quality. So any outfit that wants to maintain productivity levels within reasonable limits will probably work with the retinto.
We have before us a fine acorn-fed Iberian ham. As you can see, the shin bone is quite narrow, which denotes pureness of breed. It's obvious that this is a free-range animal, judging by the hoof, which is quite worn. These are the main characteristics of a fine acorn-fed Iberian pig. This ham has 4 sections which are quite well differentiated. The jarrete, babilla, what we call the maza, and the contramaza. Each of these has a certain flavor, a certain texture, a certain smell that's different, all within the same ham. We always try to make the cut parallel to the cutting surface. More than cutting, we are sliding the knife along the ham. A thin, translucent slice, which incorporates a bit of white fat, so that when it enters the mouth, it melts more easily, and the product's organic sensations are much more heightened. For me, this is everything. The use of the pasture, where we have been making this product for nearly 150 years.
This is the bastion of Spanish cuisine. It is a product that cannot be compared to any other, and it is impossible to make it in any other place other than the southwestern Iberian Peninsula.
In addition to being a tasty morsel, the ham from a purebred Iberian pig is a healthy morsel. And this is because the animal is fed solely on acorns while they're being fattened. The animal begins to eat acorns when it's 14 months old and weighs about 90 kilos. And 4 months later, it's 18 months old and weighs 160 kilos. Throughout this time, it feeds almost exclusively on acorns and grazes freely. For me, the matha is the part that feels the best in the mouth, that smells the best. When tasting, we take a slice, and the first thing we do is smell it. Already it shows us a range of sensations, of magnificent aromas. Secondly, we take the part which is white fat and we squeeze it with our fingers, finding its melting point. We see it melt between our fingers. In the mouth, we see that it melts quite easily. It gives off sensations. The flavor remains unchanged once you've eaten it, after you've swallowed, but the flavor lingers. The final product must be rich in omega-3, in omega-6, and omega-9. It's heart healthy. It's a powerful antioxidant. It has a low percentage of salt, and it makes up part of the Mediterranean diet. Our process begins in the countryside. First, we practice genetic selection with our animals, including not only our boars, but our reproducing females, in order to ensure piglets that have the purest bloodline possible. Well, what we handle is the slaughtering process, the quartering. We carve out the lean meat, some of which is for immediate consumption, and some of which will be cured. In the case of cured ham, what we would do is make a cut through the fat. Then later we would salt it and keep it at a temperature of 3 degrees Celsius with 90 to 91% humidity. And finally, we would start the curing process, which is done naturally in the curing room. There is a critical point, which is the moment of the tasting. This is when the master ham curer tastes each of our hams one by one, in order to see if the ham is developed adequately, and to make sure it is in perfect shape before sending it to the final consumer.
So what should consumers do? First, they should read the labels on the products they're buying. I'm talking about ham here, the front leg, the loin, and fresh meats. They should look for information on the product's breed of origin, which according to the current law would be pure Iberian ham or Iberian ham. That's actually wrong, but it is what it is. It might be bellota, recebo, cebo de campo, or cebo. These are the 4 categories that tell us how the pig was fed.
An acorn-fed pig is one that spends the last 4 months of its life grazing and feeding exclusively on acorns. If for some reason the pig does not fatten adequately, it is legal, in the category of recebo, to supplement its diet with fodder. AECERIBER is made up of more than 1,200 companies with different types of livestock practices. From those that focus more on extensive traditional methods for raising their herds, where they must provide up to 2 hectares of open land for each pig, to those producers that use a more intensive method, raising their animals in barns where they are given only feed.
That's why, from the sector's point of view, AECERIBER must defend the interests of each and every one of them. And they will do this keeping in mind the best interests of the group, but putting each one in its place, without allowing them to be pushed around or taken advantage of when it comes to using certain terms like Iberian ham to designate production models that have little or nothing to do with the traditional sector.
An exhaustive pursuit known as traceability makes it possible to know the breed, alimentation, and livestock exploitation as determining factors in the quality of the product.
We started work on genetic selection, and genetic selection is something that is carried out in every domestic breed of every species, even in Spanish horses. We are mixing a bit of tradition with the latest scientific technologies in the field of selection. We're talking about selecting for determined productive characteristics so that the sows will be more prolific and will have more piglets, or that the pigs we sacrifice will have a larger back leg or foreleg. This is always of interest to the industry, which is logical. Or even to determine genetically, or with genetic markers using DNA analysis, that this in fact is a purebred pig. It has no genes from other breeds. And in addition, to locate what are called determined productive characteristics in the DNA. AECERIBER is an association that has fought again and again for the defense, for the conservation, and for the genetic selection of this breed, which was on the brink of extinction. We must never forget that. That in 1985, there were only 5,000 females left. It was a breed that was going extinct. It was going to end up as a zoo animal. And in 1985, when AECERIBER was formed, they saved it, they conserved it, and they improved it. The amazing thing is that these farmers are willing to work with something as complex, something that requires as many resources as genetic selection. It means an extraordinary amount of labor. It means dedication. It means updating. It means using informational systems. We have to remember that the world of the Iberian pig is the oak forest, the land, where you write in a notebook with a pencil. The Iberian pig is an animal that comes from a mother and a father of the Iberian breed. And a crossbreed is an animal that comes from a cross of two breeds. And AECERIBER must continue to fight because we have to be truthful here. Iberian is Iberian, and crossbred is crossbred. It doesn't have to say pure. That would be redundant. We can't ever lose the level of adaptation and rusticity of the Iberian pig, nor, of course, the quality of its meat. And even though there are farmers that cross their animals with a Duroc breed in order to directly improve their output, they know exactly what they're doing, and they keep doing it anyway. They're all free to do it, of course. But just as they improve the quantity with a Duroc breed, they are doing direct damage to the quality of the meat. I would say proportionately or progressively. I mean, I would take the numbers and square them. I wouldn't just double them. It's another matter whether the consumer is smart enough to be able to tell the difference. If we crossed an Iberian pig with a white pig, what we'd get is a mutt. But the Duroc breed has a double advantage. The first thing is that they have black hooves, and of course, pata negra still means something very important in our sector, and is even more important for consumers. The second thing is that it has a level of fat infiltration that keeps the Iberian part from deteriorating excessively.
I've said this many times, and not just recently, for a long time. There are good farmers and there are good industrialists, bad farmers and bad industrialists.
Put the thing you're interested in the birthing stall, a Duroc stud. No. Give me a purebred.
I think there's a lack of control on the part of the Spanish authorities. They're the ones who have the quote-unquote absolute monopoly of the Iberian pig. The interests are huge. The strongest of these are the smooth operators. And if you want to understand, then you understand.
If the Iberian pig vanishes from the oak groves, and in the situation we're in, if there's no alternative, the oak groves could easily be abandoned. And this is an ecosystem which is unique in all the world. The consumers have the idea that Iberian equals Iberian oak pasture, and that's a lie, because Iberian equals Iberian oak pasture in only 13% of production. The other 87% of the production is not linked to the Iberian pig's natural habitat, which is the Iberian oak pasture.
Because acorns are scarce, we have to make the very most of them. Look, the thing is, I need more acorns. No, you look, sir. There are no more acorns.
Iberian is everything. Pure Iberian ham is just a small part. The one who pays is the final consumer, and at the moment, the final consumer is being duped.
It seems like I'm saying something outrageous. Very few people know how to distinguish between a good ham, an average ham, and a bad ham.
It's because they've been allowed to use the name Iberian for an animal that isn't Iberian. Use the correct name for things. I mean, an animal that comes from an Iberian mother and father is called Iberian, and an animal that comes from two breeds is called crossbreed. Iberian and crossbreed. And that's the key to the question. We've given the name away to an animal that is 50% crossed with foreign breeds. There's no precedent here. They don't exist.
I think we're looking at a time when we'll probably have to give up the business, the hobby, the pigs, the acorn pastures, and everything. Because we're in a situation that is very serious, very bad.
Very bad. Extremely bad. There is nothing worse for a farmer who works in this sector, who works with a breed like the Iberian pig, and who raises his herd in the open, than suffering the disappointment of finding out that what he has produced is worth nothing. There is nothing worse than seeing that the government has no reasonable response to your claims.
What business can survive 3 years of losses? This one and others like this one. But we're eating up the assets left to us by our grandparents, our great-grandparents, our parents, and our own work.
No one likes to be pursued by the voice of their conscience at all hours. And they're trying to avoid the issue. And they're trying to marginalize us. They're even trying to buy us. This association has never sold out to anyone, ever. We always learn from history. And what our grandparents and great-grandparents did, they did for a reason.
I have grandchildren now. They know what to call the pigs and distinguish the males from the females. And I don't know whether to tell them to continue with this knowledge.
Well, it's first, it's an 8-year-old dream, 8 or 9 now. And then at some point, you have to let go. We are really starting to suffer now. These are jobs and families. And it's the feeling of having worked for nothing. But, well, I'm totally ready to continue. I'm not going to stop now.
For the love my grandfather felt, for the love my parents felt, and for the love I inspired my children.